Okay, so today we're looking at America in the First World War. We're going to talk about how the United States got involved in the First World War. Alright, so part one, American power tips the balance. So Americans are going to question neutrality. In 1914, most Americans are convinced that there's no reason to join a struggle that's 3,000 miles away. So many of them want neutrality, okay? Neutrality keeps them out of the war, keeps people safe. A lot of people didn't want their sons to experience the horror of warfare. Still got a lot of Civil War veterans that are still alive that remember how terrible the war was. But you also have German Americans that supported Germany in World War One. But I would say, however, most Americans have a closer ally to the British because of the importance of a shared ancestry and language. And our economic interests were much stronger with the Allies. Right? The first years of the war, we were selling dynamite, cannon powder, submarines, copper wire, and tubing and other war material to the Allies. And both the Germans and the British imposed naval blockades on each other, and the Germans would use their U-boats or submarines to prevent shipments from going into the North Atlantic, and any ship that was found in the waters around Britain would be sunk. One of the things that hastened the United States' involvement in the war was the Lusitania disaster. This was a British passenger liner that carried 1,198 people on a fateful trip on May 7, 1915. A German U-boat sank the British passenger liner, killing all aboard, including 128 American tourists. And the Germans claimed that the ship carried ammunition. Americans are outraged, and public opinion starts turning against Germany and the Central Powers in the summer of 1915. Even German Americans start thinking, okay, no, I'm not going to do this. So here's a New York Times article. It says Lusitania sunk by a submarine, probably 1,260 dead. Twice torpedoed off Irish coast. Sinks in 15 minutes. Captain Turner saved. Frohman and Vanderbilt missing. Washington believes that a grave crisis is at hand. All right, another thing that happened the next year, the 1968 election rolled around, and Woodrow Wilson's campaign slogan was "He kept us out of war." This election, and he was running against Republican candidate Supreme Court Justice Charles Evan Hughes. Wilson wins the election, huge election, won big, and the slogan is going to be kind of ironic because within a few months, the United States is going to be embroiled in World War One. We talked about a lot about Wilson already, but we're kind of busy. Some other factors that brought U.S. into the war. All right, so number one, Germany began ignoring Wilson's plea for peace. They spent letters asking them to please find a way to get along, find resolvement, and then we have the Zimmerman note. And so we have the Zimmerman note, a telegram from the German foreign minister to the German ambassador in Mexico. This was to propose an alliance. And look, they even use Western Union, a public telegram service. Okay. So Germany promised Mexico a return of their lost territory in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. And Wilson was not happy when they got that. We also will see the sinking of 4 unarmed U.S. merchant ships by German subs after this. All right, here's a telegram from London where they state, okay, we're gonna begin. Here's the Zimmerman note that says, intercepted by a British agent, decoded. It also talks about how they're gonna begin at the 1st of February of that year of 1917. We're going to begin our unrestricted submarine warfare. And then because of these things, Washington on the rainy day on Washington on April 2nd, 1917, senators, representatives, ambassadors, members of the Supreme Court, and other guests are crowded into the Capitol building, and they hear Wilson deliver his declaration of war. In his speech, he said that the world must be safe for democracy, and Congress will end up passing the resolution a few days later. But America has to mobilize. We are not ready for war. Out of all the men in the armed forces, only 200,000 were in service when the war was declared, and only about half of them were sent overseas at the beginning. So we passed the Selective Service Act, May of 1917, and by the end of 1918, 24 million people will sign up, and 3 million will be called to duty. And only a total of about 2 million American troops will reach Europe. So animals were going to be susceptible. I don't know why that's there. Anyway. Alright, American troops are going to go on the offensive. Remember, Russia surrendered to Germany in 1917, and this is going to allow the Central Powers to focus specifically on the Western Front. And then by May of 1917, the Germans were within 50 miles of Paris. The Americans arrive, and they immediately play a major role in pushing the Germans back. And then in July and August of that year, they helped the Allies win the Second Battle of the Marne. Here's a picture on the left of several men from the 42nd Division at the Second Battle of the Marne. These men were killed by artillery fire just 5 minutes after the photo was taken. Now we're going to talk about some famous Americans that fought in the war. We have Alvin York, who was a blacksmith from Tennessee. He originally sought exemption from the war. He was a conscientious objector. But he eventually decided that it was a morally acceptable reason to fight if the cause was right. Alright? And on October 8th, 1918, he became famous for during the Battle of the Argonne Forest, which is one of the last major offenses of the war by the Allies, where he was armed with only a rifle and a revolver. And York killed 25 Germans. Now, he wasn't the only one there. He had 6 other men nearby. But then he also captured 132 prisoners, pretty much on his own. He and his other fellow soldiers did not realize that they were called to retreat, and they escaped and continued on. When he returned home, he was immediately promoted to sergeant and was hailed a hero and won several medals, including the Congressional Medal of Honor, plus several other awards, and is the most decorated soldier of the war. An important group of fighters that fought in the war were the Harlem Hellfighters. They spent 191 days on the front. They never had a man captured. They never lost any ground. And a third of their unit will end up dying in combat. One of these famous people is Sergeant Henry Johnson, who's a member of the Harlem Hellfighters. One of the things that's interesting about the Harlem Hellfighters is that they were not allowed to fight alongside the other American soldiers. They were commanded by French commanders, but they proved that they were good fighters and knew what they were doing. Sergeant Henry Johnson won the French Croix de Guerre, which is like their equivalent of the Medal of Honor, which is pretty amazing. He single-handedly fought off a German raid by himself and saved another soldier in doing so. If he had fought with Americans and been commanded, he would have won the Congressional Medal of Honor. And so, which is really sad. Yeah, I do know that he was eventually given, his family was given a Congressional Medal of Honor for his service in the war. But very important American. And the thing is, the Harlem Hellfighters, they wanted to go fight in the war too. They wanted America was their home, despite facing discrimination. They wanted to save it. So that's why they went. Um, Eddie Rickenbacker, an ace. And what I mean by an ace, that is the name that was given to pilots and planes during the war. He's one of the most famous heroes. He had a record of 26 kills, which is the highest of any American. All right, the highest number of kills was by a German, who had 45. All right. Anyway, he was an ace, and he was a member of the Hat in the Ring Squadron. November 3rd comes around. Germany's partner Austria-Hungary has already surrendered to the Allies a couple weeks earlier. That same day, German sailors are going to begin mutinying against their government. They've had enough. We're going to see other revolts go around in the country of Germany, and Germany is like, okay, we're too exhausted. We can't do this anymore. Um, and so, in the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, Germany will sign a truce or an armistice to end the war. And this is the holiday that will later become known as Veterans Day. It used to be known as Armistice Day. Alright, and that is the end of part 1, and I will make another video for part 2.